Hi, it's John at C Nation, and you are tuned into the Kush Journals. Join me and my occasional guests each weekday as we discuss all things cannabis in the great state of Utah. Hey, it's John at C Nation, and you are tuned in to the Kush Journals. This is normally where I would say hey, Jules, and she'd say hey, but Julie is otherwise occupied today. And I am having to record this intro to an interview that we did by myself because the one Julie and I put together a few days ago, I somehow lost. So I'm going to do this by myself, but the outro, you're going to hear both of us, and some of it might not make sense. That's why I apologize. I lost some audio. Haven't been able to recover it, and I am solo today. So anyway, we had the great pleasure of speaking with Nancy Whiteman, the founder and chief executive at Wana Brands. It was a really great conversation. The good guys at Grasslands hit us up before the MJBizCon NEXT convention and said, hey, would you like to interview Nancy Whiteman? And we said, are you kidding us? Of course we would. We know their brand. We like their brand. When we're out of state and in states that sell their brand, we seek them out. They're really terrific medicated gummies. We had a great conversation. I have to admit, I was a little bit nervous, and I thought about what and how and all of that I wanted to be with and around Nancy when we had her for 30 or 40 minutes. She put all that to ease right away. She's very casual. She's very laid back. She's very down to earth. And that was that was good for me. Let's just put it that way, because I really wanted to speak with Nancy, and I thought we had a real great conversation. So without further stalling for time, here is our interview with Nancy Whiteman, founder and CEO of Wana Brands, on the press room floor at the MJBizCon NEXT conference in New Orleans. Completely through serendipity, we found your brand in Las Vegas, I want to say a year-ish ago. And we pretty much fell in love with it. And we don't buy any other gummies anywhere ever for any reason.
That's so nice to hear.
Yeah, the aftertaste is not like the other ones.
Yeah, there isn't any aftertaste. Right. How about that? There isn't any weedy flavor. There isn't any headache from what was that. I will name none of your competitors because you know who's making that rubbish.
I do.
In marketing, everything is about cues and triggers, and how do we get something to top of mind. Will you please tell us how many different names or combinations of names you tried before you settled on Wana? Because Wana is a top of mind word in this industry.
You know, that's such a funny question, because so many times people ask me, what does Wana stand for? And I say, well, think about what it's made out of. Mara. And then they go, Wana. And so it really was just us kind of playing around with the name. And then, of course, there's so much you can do with Wana. You know, Wana Better Edible, you wanna, it's just a very fun name. So we definitely kicked around lots and lots of different options. But actually, it was one of our employees who came up with it. Thank you, call out to James Weinberg, who actually came up with the name Wana. And we all looked at each other and we said, that's the one. And we just went with it, and that's what we've been.
Well, that's a stroke of luck, because companies can spend fortunes on targeted marketing, for sure. Right. But so microdosing, I'd like to talk about that for just a second, because it seems like an uphill battle to me.
because of THC. If I take a 2 or 3 milligram of something, well, I'm going to personally be disappointed. What do you think about microdosing in general? I mean, I can take one of your gummies and halve it or quarter it or do whatever I want and essentially microdose. What do you think about that in general and in terms of your brand?
I love microdosing. As a matter of fact, we just released a 5 milligram drop, which isn't a small microdose, but it's smaller than our 10 milligram. Here's why I like microdosing. First of all, I am the poster child for low tolerance for edibles myself. And there's actually a lot of people out there like that. In fact, somebody recently told me that you can actually be genetically tested. There's an enzyme that predicts how you will respond to edibles. And mine would predict that I have a low tolerance for them. So I think that having options that are satisfying options, you are in fact correct that anybody can cut a gummy into 4 pieces. But it's not a viscerally satisfying thing to eat a little tiny piece of a gummy.
I was going to raise that
right?
point. You're correct.
You want something a little bit more substantial.
Right.
But I think what's happening now as cannabis becomes more mainstream, we have a number of people entering the markets who are either new to cannabis or revisiting cannabis, or they're experienced with inhalation but not with edibles, and so they need to ease into it a little bit more slowly. The other thing is that older people do tend to be more sensitive to the psychoactivity. So when we look at the big picture demographics of who's moving into consuming cannabis, it is skewing older and it's skewing more female. So I think that microdosing really gives some great options for that in terms of letting people ease in slowly and yet have a satisfying experience of I ate something more than a tiny little sliver of a gummy. So I love microdosing. The other thing that I would say about microdosing is that we don't often think about it this way, but I think it's a very effective way for people to be dosing consistently, medical patients to be dosing consistently throughout the day without having to experience too much psychoactivity, just to help keep symptoms or whatever they're experiencing at bay without, but still being able to work and to function, etc. And overall, I'd say I'm a big fan.
So 5 milligrams, understood. And you've got some time-release stuff out now that I'm dying to try. I want you to know that. Will you create a real microdose product? Or
Yes,
okay.
We will.
That's awesome. I think we think very similarly about this marketplace because you raised some topics here that literally lead into my next question. We're big fans of what we call lifestyle marketing. And we particularly talk about suburban moms and older boomers and seniors.
Right.
Those are 2 quick-growing marketplaces that, for any number of reasons, either want to be discreet, they quit smoking.
Right.
The older boomers and seniors stopped smoking the day emphatic, data came out that it'll kill you. They just stopped. And they're not picking it up again.
No.
I'm going to ask you a question that maybe is out of left field here on this issue, but all these 8 million different strain names, I think, need to go away, particularly in this marketplace, suburban moms, older boomers, and seniors. And we see a little bit of movement on this in the industry now, where businesses producing cannabis or cannabis-infused products have started to call or identify their product by what it is, by effect, by charge, by challenge, by relax, by focus, Do you like that trend? Do you dislike that trend? Can they be side by side with all the strain names? What do you think about all of that?
That's a great question. It's actually something that we have talked about deeply for quite a while. Here's what I like about it. I think it's accessible. I think that, in fact, very, very few people, I think, go into a dispensary and say, just give me whatever's going to get me the highest. I think they walk in and they say, here's the experience that I'm looking to have, right? And then they're trusting the bud tender to make that translation to a strain. But again, as the market skews more towards older people or people who are less connoisseurs, less experienced, the strain names probably mean less and less. And certainly they mean less and less when you're talking about edibles or vaping, the two fastest growing areas, because in general, this is not always true for vaping, but most products are not made at the strain level. So I think that describing things in terms of effect is very understandable for people. It's very accessible. Here's where I part ways with that to a certain degree.
Okay.
I don't think that people's descriptors, by and large, are based on anything real. I think they are untested, mostly. I think that it's mostly a marketing approach as opposed to we've tested the particular strain or class or family of cannabis that we're using in this product, and we in fact have some reason to believe that those effects are actually true. So I'm not a fan of making claims that you can't stand behind. So that's my concern about it, which is that I like our brand to be backed up by more than marketing hype. So do I think that we can head there? I definitely do. I think that that's where we're evolving to as people understand more, not just about cannabinoid profiles, but also the role of terpenes. Somebody said to me this morning, and I loved it, that, you know, the THC is the gas and the terpenes are the steering wheel, right? As we understand more about how to combine terpenes in appropriate ways, and we can say with some confidence, knowing, of course, that everybody has slightly different reactions to cannabis, that in fact we believe that what we're putting together here will have a particular effect, then I get behind this whole movement.
Do you think the marketplace will just take a company like yours right in that, and you'll have to market to effects more than strain? Do you think that's just inevitable for you?
Well, I think that I don't know about inevitable right now. It's very interesting for me to look because we do provide class-specific edibles, and they do sell extremely well as opposed to the hybrids. So clearly what the market is telling me right now is that the market is in fact still responding to class-specific. I think for myself, I don't want to be swept there. I want to choose it, and I want to choose it with good information and as authentic a way of describing an experience as I can provide to people.
Well, that's fantastic. I want to bring in the alcohol industry here for just an analogy, and let me know what you think about this. So the big brewers, not the craft guys, although they probably do too, but the big names that we all know, they roughly rely on a sizable group of heavy regular drinkers. Without them, they really they can't budget, they can't do anything, they can't function without that core group. And for some of those companies, that's probably a large number of people. Obviously, they've been around as a legal going concern for many decades, and they've been able to acquire those customers. As I see the cannabis industry right now, in terms of loyalty programs, I don't know what. I don't know really what to call that. I see that at the dispensary level. Come spend money with us. We'll rack your points up. We'll give you this, that, or the other. These types of things. It's hard for me to fathom that anybody's going to stay loyal to a dispensary. In 5 years or 5 days or 5 minutes from now, they might be gone. These things happen. But I don't, on that same coin, I don't see necessarily brands with customer loyalty type programs. And obviously, you're going to have to arrive at that core user group that is a regular, roughly heavy buyer of those. How do you do that as a brand? Or do you rely on the dispensaries? Can you put loyalty programs together right now? Advertising so sketchy in the industry.
Yeah.
What do you do about that now and in the future?
So the question is, how does one build loyalty to the brand? Is that
is
okay?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Sorry, Nancy.
No, it's great. So the answer on the loyalty programs is pretty straightforward, that the way the industry is structured right now, we don't have any direct access to the end user. So there's a lot of logistical complications with a brand trying to do a loyalty program, because we would have to rely and create a lot of work for our dispensary customers in order to actually implement that. There are some technologies and some platforms that are starting to emerge around helping people, brands develop loyalty programs, but to my knowledge, they're not particularly far along just yet. I think the bigger question of building brand loyalty, just stepping back from the loyalty programs for a minute, really has to do less with the cannabis industry and more with the blocking and tackling of brand building.
Right.
It's similar in all industries, right?
For sure.
And, one of Wana's strange advantages was that we started out, we didn't have a lot of money. We bootstrapped it, we built it from scratch. And because of that, we had to start with what we could afford. And what we could afford was building a really good product, making a really good product that was really consistent. That's what we could afford to do, right? So to me, the essence of all brands has to start with the authenticity and quality of the product itself. And I think that that's doubly important for edibles. I think that edibles, everybody has heard one or more horror stories about somebody who's had too much, and it's been an uncomfortable experience. So once people find an edible that they really like, either it tastes good to them or they feel that the effect is predictable and they like it, they tend to be brand loyal, we have found anyway, just because it's a risk minimization strategy. They like what they're getting from it. Far more than I see people being loyal on the concentrate side of the business. I think people will try that all day long. Edibles, people tend to be rather brand loyal. So it does start with the quality of your product. Then I think, you have to, like in any industry, choose a positioning for your brand that makes sense. And our tagline, as you probably know, is enhance your life, right? And so enhance your life can mean a lot of different things. If you're a medical patient, you're enhancing your life because you feel better, right? If you're using it recreationally, cannabis can help you just enjoy the things that you already love to do even a little bit more. So then for us as a brand building, it becomes, how do we put some legs under that? How do we make that tagline meaningful? And so we're always looking for opportunities to do that. For example, one of the things that we launched recently is we have a Wana athlete, and our Wana athlete is actually an ultramarathoner. She's a veteran. She's an amazing woman, and she uses cannabis for sports recovery, right? So, enhance your life, being active, being athletic, having a lifestyle brand as we try to express the Wana brand. There's a lot of different ways we can support that. Another thing that we feel strongly about with the brand is that we really want to be known for education and to be people in the industry who are leading in that area, because part of enhancing your life is using products safely, right? So we're investing a lot in developing good training for people and for bud tenders.
Do you think it's important for cannabis business owners to be cannabis consumers, or do you think it's counterintuitive maybe?
I don't think it's absolutely mandatory. I do think that most people who get into the business have some level of passion for the plant itself, at least a deep appreciation for what the plant can do, whether it's medicinally or recreationally. I would never say that somebody couldn't be in this business without using the products themselves, but I would think it would be probably fairly unusual.
So I have a question with edibles. So for an example, I like to have like a bag of chips and stuff like that. With edibles, I don't like just to have one gummy. Do you have stuff out there, or are you going to make stuff out there that's like a bag of potato chips that would have 10 milligrams in it, or a bag of chocolates and stuff like that? Do you have something that's going to be coming out like that?
So now I'm going to just talk as a business person. Here's the constraints around doing that. And I'm going to talk about Colorado regulations, but the other regulations are shaping up fairly similarly. So the way it works in Colorado is that we on the recreational side have a maximum of 100 milligram product, which is a lot, and they have to be delineated into 10 milligram serving sizes. Okay, so for us to come out with a bag of chips means that first of all, we couldn't do it anyway because you couldn't test a bag of chips. There's no way for the lab to test it and say, yes, there's 10 milligrams in here. But even if it was a bag of jelly beans or whatever, what it means is that we have to produce and package a large volume of product that only has 10 milligrams in it. The economics of doing that make it extremely expensive vis-a-vis a 100 milligram product. So people end up looking at it and saying, I'm going to buy this for $12 when I can buy 100 milligrams for $20. Why would I do that? So the economics don't end up working out well for anybody.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm going to tread lightly here for a second, not for any reason, but just because we're big proponents of women in cannabis, women and cannabis. Do you think too much is made about women in this, that, or the other? I don't, Nancy, I don't really know how to phrase this, and I've said I'm going to tread lightly a little bit. What do you think about women and cannabis? Your company, do you recruit there? Do you naturally attract there? What do you think about women and cannabis?
People sometimes say to me, you're a woman business owner, and I say, I'm a woman and I'm a business owner, right? So, we will know that we have evolved as a society when it's not necessary to say that anymore. Nobody goes to men and says, oh, you're a male business owner, right? Yay for you, Mr. Male Business Owner, right? So just the fact that we continue to need to have this discussion indicates that it's still somewhat seen as unusual. So that's comment number one on it. Comment number two on it is that there has been a lot made of cannabis being very female-friendly or women-friendly. And because I not only work in Colorado, but we're in four states, and we're launching in 2 more, and I talk to people all over the country, I would say that over time, unfortunately, what I'm seeing is that when you start looking at states that are limited license states, and what that means is that it's extremely expensive to get a license, it's not looking so women-focused anymore. It's looking pretty much like the rest of industry, which is that women still have catching up to do in terms of really being able to raise capital as effectively, put together investor groups as effectively. And so some of that early optimism that we saw in terms of women in the industry, I think was more a function of states where there was a relatively low barrier to entry and that women were able to get into it more quickly. So I would love to see more women playing at a bigger level in the industry. That would be really terrific. In terms of, do I recruit for women or, whatever, I certainly look for talented people in general. Right. And women are often very talented people.
Indeed.
Right?
Indeed.
So I guess I would answer it that way.
I raised that question. We're in Salt Lake City, and it's our home base. We grew up there. We're around Salt Lake. There are... I don't know that Utah possesses any more empowered women than any other state, but it feels like we are that way. There are, maybe it's having large families that does that. I'm not sure. The time management has got to be...
those are some amazing women.
A big thing. And
I have 2 children, and I could not possibly have done more.
Does Wana Brands have interest in the state of Utah and being a brand in the state of Utah?
Yeah, I think whenever a new state comes online, there's some criteria that we look at. One of them is how large is the population, what eligible conditions are going to be approved for cannabis, and then what are the rules around who can prescribe the medical card. And we sort of roll all of those up, and then also what is the likelihood that we're hearing of it becoming a recreational market at some point in time. We don't have the bandwidth to go into every single state that's legal. So we do go through a bit of an evaluation process. But given that Utah is our neighbor, we'd love to be in Utah at some point.
Well, yeah, your licensee program seems to be, you can't just move your company across the state. That's
correct,
a problem, obviously.
Yeah.
And it's very expensive to just leave everything behind and go to a new state and build it from the ground up.
It's really expensive.
A couple of $1 million.
Yes.
It's a ridiculous number.
It's a big number.
So, I guess I see that as a real positive. We want your brand in Utah. We really do. For every reason you can imagine. And so it's great that you are thinking that you'd like Utah. You mentioned recreational. Is it important for you as a company to, when you identify states you'd like to go into, that there is that pathway from medical to recreational? You need that for sale? That's your forecasting.
It certainly is one of the criteria, but it is a state-by-state situation. You get a extremely populated state like a Florida, for example, and there's some inherent attractiveness just if it remains medical forever. There's a certain, even though we're not building facilities in the states we go to, there's just a certain level of overhead that gets generated when you enter a new market. You have to support that market in a variety of ways. So if we can't see our way clear to enough volume to make that profitable, then we have to take that into consideration.
Fair enough. Our listening audience is Utah based, and I know we know people up and down the state. There are entrepreneurs that are just chomping at the bit here to get going on this. Would someone interested in being a licensee, do they approach your company and raise their hand and say, hey,
yes,
tell us what to do?
I literally get emails like that every single day.
Well, that makes it pretty easy, doesn't it? It's obviously a rigorous process start to finish to get that done, but I know there will be people, we probably know them personally, that will be those people raising their hands saying, I think we can kill this in Utah.
Right.
No, that's great. So we sat through, well, that makes it sound like a negative. We were in the keynote session yesterday. We won't sit through anything.
Sat through it, okay.
We liked every minute of it, in fact. And there was a question towards the end of it, like, what's next?
Uh-huh.
Who knows necessarily? But the thought that came to my mind was, don't you say what's next in this industry? Don't the big companies that are making the products, and we don't care what they are, don't you say what's next instead of anybody else, consumers, or you have to respond to consumers, but don't you say what's next?
I think it's a partnership, honestly. Okay. I think, in a brand new industry like this, there isn't necessarily a strong direction from the consumer saying, here's what I want next, right? So there is a give and take where you're putting some stuff out, you're seeing how people respond to it, reacting to it. One of the many things that infrastructure-wise is lacking in the industry is that we don't have a strong base of consumer market research as other industries have. We do buy what's available, and so we're always sort of trying to understand, get a sense of the pulse. But that's not necessarily what leads either. It's getting a snapshot in time. But what we don't really have is a lot of ways of tracking, sitting down with people, for example, or either focus groups or quantitative research, where we're putting new ideas on the table and saying, what's your reaction to this? And the truth is, even that might not be all that accurate, because we really, until people have the actual experience of the products, it's kind of a theoretical discussion. It's kind of like, I'll give an example, like, if 25 years ago somebody had said, gee, I've got this idea for recording TV shows that you can watch at any time, you might have said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. But until TiVo actually came out and did that, we didn't actually know how it was going to be received, right? So I think it's kind of the same thing with new cannabis products. We can have instincts, based on our knowledge of the industry, and also just based on broader societal trends that are going on out there, particularly in the health and wellness and food categories. So I thought the question yesterday of what is it that you look at when you're evaluating what to do was a good one, because I think you could end up in a situation where you think you've got the next great thing, and in fact it's going to flop, right?
Hit and miss business models are expensive, aren't
They're
they?
very expensive, exactly.
We're firm believers that when we can get more consumer side data gathered and parsed and analyzed, that the potential for like 1 hour cannabis exists. Like I could take my data that I've tracked for however long that says, this set of criteria, these terpenes, these work for me to do this.
Right.
And could take that to a 1 hour photo, anything like that. Do you think that's a real future of this industry, is kind of on demand?
Well,
or close enough to that?
So you're talking almost like a compounding pharmacy type approach, right?
Exactly that.
Okay. I think we're quite a ways away from that, and for a number of reasons. First of all, just the technology around extraction is not mainstream enough to do that at any scale. Okay. So terpenes, for example, relatively few people have the capabilities to actually separate out the individual terpenes from the cannabis. Okay, you can get botanical or plant-based terpenes, but the technology is not quite there to do that from cannabis on any kind of a scale. Or the same thing for cannabinoids. We can all get the THC and the CBD out of it, but the more rare ones are harder to get out, and they're in very small quantities. So that's a limiting factor right there. Then perhaps even the bigger problem is that I don't think we are anywhere in terms of the research that tells us how to combine things. That's what we're extremely behind on. So I think until that level of research is available, it would probably be premature to think about sort of like a compounding pharmacy type approach.
So what's next for Wana Brands?
Well, we're going to be focusing a lot on our out-of-state expansion. We're in 4 markets. We're launching in 2 more right now. We're in deep discussions with probably another 4 or 5 right now, plus Canada. And of course, California is a big decision too. So I think we're going to probably continue with new product development, which we like to pilot in Colorado and then take out to other states, and then focusing on the expansion. Yes.
Nancy Whiteman, CEO of Wana Brands, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your products.
Did we say down to earth?
Yes.
It was the easiest conversation I've ever had, I think. And it's because Nancy was just so cool and calm and casual. Now, granted, she's been down this path a million times. We tried to ask questions and go in a direction that maybe she doesn't get asked all the time. I think we did all right.
Thank you so much again, guys.
It was a fun interview. We had a blast. We hope you enjoyed listening to it. And honestly, we hope you listen to it 1,000 more times. She imparts a great deal of wisdom and information about this marketplace for anyone that's listening and paying attention. Thanks, everyone at Grasslands. And, of course, Nancy Whiteman, founder and CEO of Wana Brands. Thank you very much for the interview.
Bye, guys.
Kush Journals is a copyrighted broadcast of the South American Gold Corporation. We appreciate your likes and shares on social media, including Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.